Hi everyone, it's Erin from the Provincial Farmhouse. In today's video, I'm going to be creating some French country home decor using 𝐘𝐲𝐬𝐧's Falcon2 Pro laser. For my first project, I'm going to be creating some corbel bookends. Now, I've already got the file here. I bought it off Etsy. I will link that in the description below. I'm cutting this actually out of 19mm pine, so I did have to adjust the height of the laser, and we are at 80%, and I ended up doing about 6 passes. Now, obviously with corbel bookends, often it's a good idea to have 2 end designs that have a scroll feature, and then you often want a plain centerpiece. You can see here it has cut it so beautifully. Just cut it like butter. It was so much fun to make. So you can see here I have made 2 of the scroll design and I've got 1 blank center design. I'm going to use some wood glue on the inside piece of the scroll design there, and then I'm going to be using some Gorilla super glue as well, just as a bit of extra hold and that immediate hold. I'm then going to position the center cut piece over the top and line it up, and obviously add glue to the other piece that's going on the other side. I'm using a quick set wood glue, so I didn't have to wait long at all until my pieces were all glued together really well. I then took out a pre-made mix of a brown chalk paint and the salt wash mixture texture additive, and I'm just dabbing that on with a chip brush over the entire corbel. Now, I want these to look vintage and old and worn, and obviously we've got a couple of different wood tones here. I want it to be a more uniform color underneath. We're going to be layering in some milk paint a little bit later, so this is just going to be a really great base for me to be able to distress back to, and it's going to give these pieces a really unique antique look, which is exactly what I'm going for. So I'm going to continue to add that mixture over the entire piece, and then when it was dry, I came in and applied a satin sealer so that my paint wasn't as porous, and so that I would get some fun cracking and texture when I apply my milk paint, because milk paint obviously likes porous surfaces. I needed to create a little bit of resist. When that was dry, I took out my Fusion milk paint in the color Hotel Robe. This is a lovely bright white. I'm measuring out equal parts powder and water, and then I'm going to stir it together really well. I'm then going to start applying my milk paint, and I'm going to be using a chip brush to do that. And I ended up doing 2 coats for this, and I'm just going to apply it over the entire piece. I had to switch to a smaller little artist brush to get into some of the smaller, tighter sections there, but obviously milk paint dries pretty quick, so this wasn't a very long process. It was really quite easy, and I'm allowing my brush to skip over certain details, and I'm just loving how the paint is bringing this all together. I'm of course going to be adding the milk paint over the entire piece, and this is a really great project. I'm so excited that I was able to cut such thick wood with the Falcon2 Pro laser. It's just a complete game changer. I'm going to take out my hairdryer, and I'm going to start speeding up the drying process of that milk paint. That is going to help create those cracks and that texture, and it's going to create that wonderfully vintage look. When it was dry, I took out a wet wipe, and now I'm just going in and doing some wet distressing. I'm focusing on the edges of the corbel. I'm focusing on some of the areas where I've got maybe some lumps of that milk paint, and I'm pulling that back. That's going to create that chippy effect. And again, these just look so authentically old, perhaps even antique or some sort of architectural salvage style piece, and I just love it. I ended up sealing the corbel with a spray sealer in matte. I used milk paint for this, but obviously this is a project where you could use any kind of paint, and you could definitely use sandpaper instead of doing wet distressing if you weren't using a paint that's reactivated by water. And here's a look at our first finished corbel. I love how this turned out. I think it looks definitely like a piece of architectural salvage, just such a beautiful decor piece. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. I decided to do another Corbel-Design, and here I'm showing you the 𝐘𝐫𝐬 Falcon camera view. The beauty of the Falcon 2 Pro is that it has a built-in camera, so I can lay down my material. I'm using pine. I have my design there ready to go. I can select it and resize it based on the size of my material, and it even gets even more precise. I can then go into the camera and I can input the exact width and height of the material that I'm using, and that is going to give you even more precise positioning. So as you can see there, it's adjusting the view, it's showing you exactly how big the material is, and it's showing you exactly how the design is going to be cut on your material. So this is just so precise, perfect if you're going to be doing some batch cutting. You can position your designs all over, you can spread out your materials. This just makes cutting different designs so much easier. Once I was happy with how that was positioned and the size, I obviously had the machine start to work its magic. It's cutting out the design, but I need to create a centerpiece. So to do that, I'm just going to delete the swirl design in the center of these. And once I've done that, I'm going to cut that out, and that will be the exact right size for my corbels. It'll be a great blank section to go in the center. I'm just so excited by the possibilities of being able to cut out thick pine like this. Again, this is 19 millimeters. So I've got all of my pieces ready. I'm going to do just like I did with the first one. I'm going to lay down my quick set wood glue, and I'm also going to use that super glue for that immediate hold. So obviously if I wanted to create bookends, I would double up and I would be making 2 of each of these designs, but I just wanted to give you some ideas on the amazing things that you can cut out with the ability to cut that thicker wood, and corbels are one of my favorite things, so I'm very excited that I can create my own. Once the glue was set and dry, I took out that same brown chalk paint and salt wash mixture, and I'm going to apply that just like I did on the first one. Again, we're trying to create a layered and weathered and worn paint effect, and I'm also thinking about what I can distress my milk paint back to. I am going to end up using a different color here, but just like with the first one, with the milk paint, we want to create that crackle, that texture, and we want to be able to distress back to that brown tone there. Once the paint was dry, I then took out some of that satin clear coat to seal the entire piece so that we can create a little bit of resist for the milk paint. When the clear coat was completely dry, I then took out Fusion's Monterey milk paint, and I'm going to measure out equal parts powder and water, and I'm going to stir that really well. I'm then going to start applying the milk paint with a chip brush, and in this particular occasion, because of the color that I was using, I ended up only having to do 1 coat, whereas with the first one we were using a lighter color. I ended up doing 2 coats, so just 1 coat of this lovely deep blue tone over the entire project. And I'm not aiming for full coverage. If my brush skips over certain areas, I'm very happy to just leave that as is, because we are going to end up doing a bit of wet distressing just like we did in the first one. Once I finished applying the milk paint, I took out my hairdryer, and on the hottest setting, I am speeding up that drying process. Again, this is going to help create texture and that wonderful crackle. I then took out a wet wipe and I came in and did a bit of wet distressing around the edges and over the top of some of the extra build-up of that paint. Once I finished distressing the piece, I took out what I had left of my white milk paint hotel robe and I watered it down more, and I'm just going to apply it over the top of the Monterey milk paint, and I'm also watering it down even further with my mister, and then I'm going to come in and dab off some of that excess. Ultimately, I'm creating sort of a white wash over the top. Again, this is just going to add to the effect of age and give it almost that Gustavian sort of style look. So I'm just going to repeat that same process over the entire corbel. You could also use a white wax for this step, or you could come in with a white glaze. I just really wanted to use up the milk paint that I had. When the paint was dry, I sealed my project with a spray sealer. And here's a look at our second finished corbel. I'm really pleased with how this turned out. This is a little bit of a simpler style of corbel, but as you can see, they are both cut out perfectly. It was so much easier than trying to use a jigsaw for this project. Let me know what you think of these in the comments. For my final project, I'm going to be creating this lovely ornate clock. This is a file I bought from Etsy. I am going to be working with MDF this time, so I had to adjust my settings for that. Now this design comes with a front layer and a back layer, so I'm going to be starting with the front layer here and cutting that first. And it took about 4 passes and probably only about maybe 15 minutes to have this first piece done, and I just love this design. It is so gorgeous. As I said, I will link it in the comments, but as you can see, it has cut it out to perfection. So once I had done that, I had the back file here. I had to make sure that was the exact same size as the other design, and I then cut that out also on MDF. This would make a really great gift because you would be able to go in and customize this completely. You could put decoupage paper on the back, you could use metallics, the possibilities are endless. So once it had finished and I'd taken away all those extra pieces, I then took these outside and sealed the front and back with a clear spray sealer to seal everything in. I then took out Paint Couture's Driftwood mineral paint, and I'm going to apply just one coat. This had really great coverage over the MDF. Just one coat of this lovely grey tone over the top of the back piece. And this has a built-in sealer in it, so I'm not going to have to go in and use any sort of top coat to seal this back piece. So I painted the entire thing and then let that dry. For the top layer of the clock with the numbers, I'm going to use Paint Couture's Simply White. This is just a lovely bright white, and I'm going to go in and paint over the entire piece. I am using a smaller paintbrush here to get into a lot of those smaller little nooks and crannies and the details. I probably could have just taken it outside and used a white spray paint. I didn't have any at the time, so this is what we're going with, but it definitely would make it a lot easier to spray something like this because of all of the really delicate, beautiful details in the scroll work. So keep that in mind if you want to give this project a try. I ended up doing 3 coats to get the coverage I wanted. Once the paint was dry, I flipped it over. Remember, it doesn't matter if this part is messy. We are gluing this part down on top of the grey backing. I'm just using some Gorilla Super Glue on the back here, trying to hit all those points to make sure that everything will be glued down really securely. Then I'm going to flip it over, position it on top of the back piece and apply some pressure. Once that was all set and the glue was dry, I took out a paintbrush and I'm just going to go around the edge and I'm going to paint the edges white, both of those edges, so that it looks like a more uniform piece. So definitely going over that back plate area there as well, just so there's a bit more cohesion in the project. I ended up doing 2 coats around the outside. When the paint was dry, I added my clock attachment to the front face. Now, I could have probably made the clock a little bit bigger. I can cut up to 40 by 40 in the Falcon 2 Pro, but I am really happy with how this looks. This would be such a great gift if you've got a booth or you like to do markets. This would be a great seller, I think. Let me know what you think of the clock in the comments. I had so much fun making these projects with 𝐘𝐈 Falcon 2 Pro. If you would like to get your own laser, make sure you check out the links in the description below. Leave any questions you might have about this amazing machine below as well. If you have a small business, the Falcon 2 Pro could be just the thing to take your business to the next level.